Mamdani and Bill de Blasio endorsed Zohran Mamdani recently, like I think in the last 48 hours.
Yeah.
I got the door, John.
Okay, good. I love that. Got the door.
It does sound like a doorbell.
Right? Okay, so we're all set with the recording and so forth. And uh let me get back to this. So we're going to do okay, we're ready to go. Um and Katie's here, I think. No, Damu, great. Okay, we'll probably have a few people flowing in. It seems a little light start here, but my name's John Mudd. I'm with the Midtown South Community Council, and this is our monthly meeting, the first Tuesday of every month here uh, at 9:30 a.m. in the morning. And we have a special guest here, Keith McHenry, who's up early in the morning, like at 5:30. He's calling in from California. Thank you, Keith, for doing that. I know that's a sacrifice, and I love you for that. And
Thank you.
and we have Rob Robinson, our advisor and partner and fighter for for humanity. And we have some Midtown South Committee guests and some other people here too. Thanks, Renee, for joining us too. We'd like to maybe if you want to give a little update on what's going on, um, like from the start. Let me just get to the agenda, and we'll just let me put this down here. We've got some more people coming in. That's good. Okay. Keith, I put your picture up there.
That's great.
Right on top of the agenda. All right. The if anything happens with anybody jumping in there that shouldn't be in there, and we have to shut down, we'll come right back up. Hope you'll join us. I mean, it's happened twice, I think, but outside of that, we've been pretty good as far as anybody invading our space here. Of course, our purpose here is to share some knowledge and resources, identify problems and solutions to homeless housing and health crises. Our prior meeting, we haven't been doing a policy meeting. I think that we're going to save that for some housing focused, a community-led plan. Maybe I've been talking about with a few folks. Council highlights, we have a lot of initiatives going. We have our annual report. If you haven't seen that, please do. We've been highlighted on a few programs, and we've been coalescing with all of the Chelsea area folks and tenants from public housing to stop NYCHA and related developers from demolishing the housing, and we're fighting pretty hard. Renee, you wanna kind of give a little preview or an insight? She's muted, or she's out for lunch or breakfast or something, coffee. Luana, you want to say a few words? Oh, okay. Um, we've been doing a lot of Keith, you'll love this, and this is why I like what you're doing. We've been doing a lot of farm distribution. We have a little 50 by 100 spot up in Kosaki in the Hudson Valley. We have a urban farm on 53rd Street, and we have a partner who's doing a lot of farming who gives us a lot of overflows. And so what we do is we bring it down to, shelters and Encore and Hudson Family Shelter, to small tenement folks. And lately we've been distributing to public housing because we've been connecting with them and to build the capacity, people power. And here's one of our latest distribution, and this is one of our partners. I just There we go. This is Back Home Farms where we get, and then we pick it up. That's Joe, and that's Faye from Back Home Farms, and this is our little pot up in. It's called Paradise Farms, and then we bring it down to folks. We brought lots and lots of food. There's Mar-a-Lagos doing some sidewalk painting. And there's our farm. It's only about 50 by 100, but there's a lot of food being produced from that location. The Communities Together Social Justice Music Fest, that's coming up on the 21st. We bring lots of folks from to speak about the health issues, and then homelessness and housing. This will be our second year. We talk about developers. We talk about even anti-war folks come. They were here last year. We take up a whole block, and we have some music intertwined with the speeches, and lots of other events. Lots of advocacy folks come out and take a table, and they present themselves however they want, what their focus is, and either trying to raise funds from their tables or speak to people, and then of course connect with all the rest of the people who are there for the event. So I think our issue today, we want to focus on, we've talked about it many times, this is the criminalization of the poor and the policies that create the poor. But I'm going to let, I think Rob has a time limit. I think he needs to be out early. I'm going to let Rob start, and then Keith will follow, if that's okay, Keith.
Yeah, that's
And we've talked this issue over a few times, and maybe we can talk about some actions we can do. Rob, why don't you introduce yourself and take it away?
So thank you, John, and thank you all for being here this morning. Many of you know me, some of you may not, so I'm gonna go through a little bit of an introduction as to who I am and understand the perspectives that I'm presenting from my lived experience point of view. So my name is Rob Robinson. I've experienced 2.5 years being homeless on the streets of Miami and 10 months in a New York City homeless shelter. And I think that helps to shape the way that I look at the issue. Just to give you a little context, when I came out of shelter, I kept hearing that the fact that people were stunned or amazed at the fact that I was only in shelter for 10 months. And my reaction was always, that's 9 months too long. It should only be a 30-day experience at most, right? An emergency situation, then we find you housing. But I've learned a lot since that, particularly being here in New York City, and then been able to contrast how the issues are handled in New York juxtaposed against the way the issues are handled in Miami. So currently I am a professor of urbanism in a graduate program at the New School called Design and Urban Ecologies. I'm a senior advisor for a human rights program called Partners for Dignity and Rights. And I'm currently part of a consulting group that is working with the Chicago Continuum of Care, which I'll explain in a little detail in a minute. They got a grant from the federal government to move people from street homelessness directly into housing. It's a big monumental task, but you need a process for making this happen. And the consulting firm that I'm with, we're tasked with helping them think through this and developing a process to make this happen. So when I talk continuum of care, and I'll reference New York a lot with respect to this. So there are two ways homeless services are delivered in New York City. One way, the main way, is through an avenue called the Department of Homeless Services, which is overseen by the Department of Social Services, on a $3 billion a year budget to support the shelter, what I like to refer to industrial complex in New York. And that complex exists because we have a law in this city that says there's a right to shelter. On any given night, a homeless person has a right to go to New York City and say, I want a bed, and New York City has an obligation to give that person a bed. That has created this shelter industrial complex over a period of time that just keeps expanding and representing housing for some versus the reality of a shelter, right? So I think what we ultimately would love to get to is a right to housing versus a right to shelter. And I think they look very different. I also serve on an institute, the advisory committee for the Institute for Global Homelessness, which is based out of DePaul University in Chicago, which is looking at a way to universally count homelessness in a systemic way and the same way across different countries. Different countries may have different resources to do this, but it doesn't give you true numbers. We have to find a true way to gather this information from around the world. So all that being said, I think fundamentally this country has never addressed poverty from the time it was created, and that's exacerbated the situation, which is now homelessness. One of the big problems, the bigger problem that we have with respect to homelessness is street homelessness. I'm going to go through this slowly because I want you to understand the perspective that I bring my thinking to this issue. I'm not a fan of somebody living on the streets. I don't support a person's right to live on the street. And I say that because I had to do it for 2.5 years and it sucked. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody that I know. So when it comes to stop the sweeps campaign and these other issues to stop it, I don't speak out against it. I don't think that the answer is to allow a person the right to sleep on the street, but I understand people have a right to make a decision. I understand that. But I think people sometimes can make a wrong decision. And why do I say that? Because I believe that in a place like Miami, where I was homeless, the sun would have eventually killed me living on the street. I could not deal with the sun. The second day I was in Miami, I shed most of my belongings, which was in a black bag, which was pulling the sun towards me. I said, it's got to go. A lot of people can't make that decision, and I get it, don't want to make that decision. I threw away a lot of personal items, but it was best for me. The other lesson that I learned from that experience in Miami was by a gentleman we called Arkansas, who would spend his time behind the library in an area of Miami called Sunnyside, where I slept at night. And he'd sit behind the library, pondering his thinking, how did I end up here? But Arkansas sat on the back steps of the library, and he was found one morning in a state of rigor mortis. He probably thought himself to death in the sun, right? Not thinking that this sun isn't best for me. The other example that I'll give was what chased me out of Miami was a former Vietnam vet who rolled up on me one night on the beach and started a conversation with me. He was a double amputee in a wheelchair, and he started talking to me at 10 minutes after 8. And he's drinking Georgie vodka from a pint bottle. And halfway through the conversation, he tossed a bottle to the side and he reached in his belongings and pulled out another bottle and started drinking. And by 10 minutes to 9, about 40 minutes later, he said, Rob, I'm sorry. I got to go. I got to go get a wake up for the morning, meaning another bottle of vodka. He was out on those streets for 25 years, a former Vietnam vet. And that said to me, this is a problem in this country, and I got to do what I can to make a change. Nobody should be forced to make that kind of decision, and we should bring support to those type of people. That being said, I don't think our current administration has a lot of empathy or sympathy for people in the situations that they're in. They're creating mechanisms to make people's lives a living hell or worse than it already is. And that starts with the cutting of benefits that are going in to people that are living in an impoverished situation that need a hand up. And we are cutting access to vouchers, Section 8 vouchers, HUD funding, even for shelters. While I'm no fan of shelters, it's a better alternative than the street, right? So again, just to go back, Miami has 3 shelters, 2 million people. New York has close to 600 shelters with a population of 8 million people. So there's a distinction there, right? You don't have enough in some cities, but in another city you have too much. The other thing I'll say, comparing Miami to New York, while I was on the streets of Miami, I had to beg to eat, right? You had to hustle up money to get something to eat. I make the argument in New York, if you're hungry and you're on the streets, the only reason you're hungry is because you're lazy, because there's a soup kitchen or a church somewhere nearby that is serving a meal. That's a reality, folks. It is. And I've eaten in those soup kitchens during my 10 months in New York City homeless shelter many a times, and I sustained myself. And there's also things like Midnight Run, which comes out on the street and brings food and clothing. There's also nuns and different religious orders that'll come, in certain parts of the city and just deliver meals constantly. So there's always food around, but it's not there in places like Miami, and people have to find alternative means to sustain themselves. So we're at a place now where I admit the federal administration just doesn't care, doesn't have any empathy or sympathy for the situation. There's a proposal to extremely cut the budget of the housing and urban development. And there's also a move afoot to criminalize homeless people. That has been going on in New York before the federal government even proposed it, right? Our current mayor proposed pulling people off the trains and putting them in hospitals because he perceives them to be mentally incapacitated. I don't think that's a reason to criminalize people. I think you need to bring help to those people and supply them with the necessary services that they need to get them on the right track. And the big need in this city is for housing. We don't have enough housing. We have to find different ways of bringing housing to the people that need it most, instead of building for investment, which seems to be the main avenue in the city right now. So our president has put boots on the ground from the military in Washington. We saw it earlier this summer in LA, and they started a sweeps campaign to remove people from the streets. But they didn't have alternative places for people to go. So what you basically did was just scattered people, right? The one thing you know about encampments is that there is a sense of community there, one of the fundamentals of life, right? If I don't have certain things, that community around me is going to watch my stuff while I go look for a job or whatever it is I do during the day, right? There's also a kinship that exists in some of these settlements, that all of a sudden you're dispersing people, and people are self-sufficient. They're going to find some way to exist. I make the argument you could go in a shelter, but the argument against that is many of the shelters are dangerous. I understand that. Even somebody like me who spent 10 months in a shelter, I don't think it was the safest place in the world, but I did survive it, right? And I ain't no tough guy by any means, but I survived it. I survived it because I had a sense of community around me. When I was in a facility called the Open Door, which was behind Port Authority back in the day, there were 8 of us in a crew that looked out for one another. So if you mess with one of us, you had to mess with 8 of us, right? Simple, right? So we had our sense of community, and we survived that way. So I think this idea of putting boots on the ground in New York, criminalizing the homeless, only exacerbates an ongoing situation. You can put people in hospitals, in jails. It's going to cost you more than finding permanent housing for the people, permanent supportive housing, which is the true need in this city, right? So it also means a policy change is needed. And what do I mean by that? There is a policy making its way around the world that seems to work in many cities, except many cities in the US, because there's a refusal to submit to it, called Housing First. The basic premise of a Housing First policy says, let's take people off the streets, put them in housing, and bring any necessary social services or other services that they may need. This has been proven in places like Hennepin County in Minnesota, Houston, Texas, in Wisconsin and Milwaukee and Madison, Wisconsin. It has been effective. But the real test for me is I look at the country of Finland, which countrywide imposed a housing first policy in 2008. And Finland is probably close to functional zero with respect to homelessness. They've proven that it works. There's all types of data to go along with this. But we have a policy in this country that says, I got to fix you first, Rob. You're broken because you're homeless, and I got to fix you. It ignores the problems that exist. It ignores that you've impoverished me for a lifetime. You put obstacles in front of me to keep me from advancing. And then when you have people that say, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, guess what? I don't have any boots, right? You won't allow me to own a pair of boots, so I can't pick myself up by your bootstraps. And I've always held a grudge in my heart because the first African American president in this country, Obama, made that statement back in 2009. And it disturbed me because to hear him say it, and I know he came from a place of privilege, but you're speaking to people that this country is throwing obstacles in front of, and you say pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, it leaves me with a distasteful something in my mouth and in my body. I'll end this by saying we need to find a way to preserve housing in this country, preserve affordable housing, to build more. It's a challenge, folks. Land is not as readily available as we might think it is. So if you're going to build, what are you going to build on? And finally, I'll say to this, I get a lot of arguments from my comrades around the country where this idea of tiny houses have been successful in places like Denver and up in areas of Washington and Oregon, where there's plenty of wide open space. So I always often respond to those people who ask me about tiny houses. What can I do? Stack them on top of one another? We just don't have the space. So we have to get creative with respect to housing. Maybe that's reinvesting in public housing where there are, so many vacant apartments that are falling into a state of disrepair. I won't go deep into public housing because I know there are other voices that know more about it on this call than me. But I think that was once our true social safety net in this country for people who were impoverished and struggling to find housing. So reinvestment should be front and center in public housing. And thinking about other ways to build housing and create housing stability in the city and in this country. So I'm going to stop there. I don't know if John wants me to take questions. I can be here for a few more questions, but I will have to bail at some point because I have to meet a student at the new school.
Yeah, Rob, you're also your face is getting cut off in the frame, just to let you know.
I'm moving around in my chair, so that was me. I apologize.
No, no worries. I know you've talked about you've talked about maybe taking you go back to a story of yours about taking possession, and I've always kind of liked that story. And right now we're having a fight, with the uh, we have no friends. We're fighting not only NYCHA, we're fighting the developers, of course. We're fighting the politicians. We have no friends there. We're fighting even the media, the mainstream media. So you've got some housing that are not being used, and you've got some minor repairs needed here and there, and there are probably some boiler issues. I've heard about those, but all in all, the buildings are very sturdy. All in all, they just haven't been doing a job in maintaining them. So, taking possession of housing. I loved your idea about that. Could you kind of tell that story or elaborate on
Absolutely.
how?
So, a lot of my background in history was post foreclosure crisis I was a founder of a national movement called the Take Back the Land movement. So Obama had taken our tax money to bail out the banks, sending us a message basically saying, Bank of America can't fail, but Luana, you can fail, but Bank of America can't fail. So I'm going to take your tax money to keep the banks from going under. Those banks, and many of us bought a house, many homeowners purchased a house, and we had to buy an insurance policy from the federal government that would guarantee that we paid off that mortgage, right? And then Bank of America and some of the other banks, I like to target Bank of America because they were the biggest offenders in doing this stuff, purchased a mortgage portfolio of a group called Countrywide Mortgage. and they started foreclosing and evicting us in record numbers. And so Bank of America basically evicted you from your home. They got paid off by the federal government, and they still had possession of the house. What? No, 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 no. Those right. You can't have the tax money in the houses too. So we decided, and it was mostly happening to African Americans, that we're going to take back our houses. And this was a movement that started in Miami. As a member of Picture the Homeless, I was one of 4 people that went down to Miami to learn from this group. Max Rameau was the leader of the group down there. Max and I became very good friends, and we decided, after meeting with the leader of the Malcolm X grassroots movement in Atlanta on Labor Day weekend, so this is pretty interesting. Labor Day weekend 2009, we met in Atlanta and decided to take back the land national. And we started a movement May 1st, 2010, in support of what we call the real Labor Day around the world, and recognizing some of these struggles that existed long before us. But it's an idea that still sits powerful with me. I think we as people need to repossess vacant spaces. And I understand in the past that there was police oppression and whatnot, but I've learned from different groups around the country and around the world that you can be successful in this. So right here in New York, I know of an Episcopal priest. He's retired now, and he works part-time in a few churches. That is part of a collective that squatted 11 buildings on the Lower East Side since 1979, and is still in possession of many of those buildings. And they went in with that practice that John mentioned. They knew how to turn the electricity on. They knew how to supply water to those buildings. And eventually they put sweat equity into those buildings, fixed them up. And that Episcopal priest and his partner lives in one of those apartments in one of those buildings, basically since 1979. I've been in and out of there. I've seen them. They're nice apartments. People have reconstructed them. They put their time and energy into doing it. But I've also seen this in effect in Sao Paulo, Brazil, right? You go to the center of the city in Brazil and you see multi-story buildings with a banner hanging out of the window saying 450 families live in here. We took this vacant building. They let you know. They're very forward with it. There's also the European Squatters Collective that does a bicycle tour from city to city every summer, and reclaiming vacant spaces and creating what we call social centers. They take a multi-story building and they turn it into a cooperative, right? There are families can exist there. There's a cooperative library downstairs, cooperative laundromat, cooperative market, cooperative schools, right? So it's a different way of living. And I think we have to open our imagination here, John. I think what we're stuck in this capitalist society, that we think like the capitalists do, and we buy into the way they want us to live, right? And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I said this to many of you, and I mean this sincerely. Before I went homeless in 2001, March 2001, my salary was 85.5 a year plus a 10% and 95.5 a year plus a 10% annual bonus, which means my salary was over $100,000 with an undergraduate degree. Today, I'm probably living off a third of that, and I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life, right? So it's a mindset, right? The capitalist society has us acquiring stuff and believing accumulation is the way to live. No, F that. And I think we need to understand the role of workers in this society. We can work and work and work. We're hamsters on a wheel, making the 1% rich while we struggle. So a lot of this is about education. When I came out of homelessness, I said I need to do a brain dump because the values and principles that were instilled in me weren't what I experienced over the first half of my life when I look back, right? I had to recalibrate. So I call it the transformation of Rob Robinson. And I live by this statement that I made back in 2008 at Columbia University. Gentrification leads to displacement, which leads to homelessness, which leads to criminalization. And Neil Smith was in the audience at that conference. Neil Smith was a mentor of mine, a distinguished professor of geography and anthropology at the City University of New York Graduate Center. And he said to me, could you repeat that statement? He stood up in the middle of the conference, in the middle of my talk, and I repeated it. At the end of the conference, he walked up to the table and said, I want to know how you came up with that theory. And my response to Neil was this. For 2.5 years, all I could do was think, how did I end up here? And why do all the people look like me? And that's how I came up with that theory. And the rest is, as they say, is history. I believe that is a big part of why I'm teaching today. A lot of academics found a lot of value in that statement, and I find students today, and that's one of the reasons why I got to leave the school to go meet a student, because she heard me say that the first day of class, and boom, she wants to meet with me. She worked with a group out in LA called the Los Angeles Community Action Network, or LA CAN, which works with homeless folks like Picture the Homeless did here in New York. So, statements like that resonate. How you come up with those theories can resonate with people, but I think we need to find a way to touch the souls of society as a whole, because we are still a divided community that thinks of me, myself, and I and my family, right? That's what comes first, rather than thinking about humanity as a whole. What can I do to make our living situation better? So I'll stop there. That was kind of long and preachy. I apologize, but I just wanted to get this point across.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions for Rob? Go ahead, Luan.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Really quickly, I really love that. I wrote that down: gentrification, displacement, homelessness, and criminalization. That is definitely the steps to homelessness, right? And jail. There was two things that I wanted to ask you about, but not ask you about, but one thing I wanted to comment about now is the criminalization of the homeless. In Trenton, New Jersey, you know that they are fining the homeless, and of course, many people don't have ongoing income, right? So what's going to happen? They're going to go to jail, right? And then they're going to come out, and it's going to create recidivism. It's going to create a history that then they can't get a job or a home, or all kinds of different things will result from that, right? So it's a plan to keep people down, right? To keep your foot on somebody's neck, right? So they're really not encouraging people to or helping them, right, in society right now. They think homelessness is a criminal act instead of a societal act, and I just wanted to add that. But to your point about the Chicago Continuum of Care, the federal grant, now with President Trump's angst against the mayors and the governors of Chicago, is there effect on that program in regards to how President Trump retaliates against people who are not following his, directives, and the militarization of Chicago?
We haven't. So the organization, the Chicago group, already drew down those funds. And so we've already coordinated. I was in Chicago last Monday and Tuesday. So we started a conversation. We started our advisory process. It remains to be seen what happens if he does send the military to Chicago. But we're in constant contact. As a matter of fact, I'll be on the phone with them on a Zoom call later this afternoon. What they call it the All Chicago Initiative. We'll be on the phone with them this afternoon. But I think they're in a pretty good place to make this work. They've identified folks who they think are a good comment. We have outreach teams who we're working with, that we're talking to. But you never know. You never know what this administration is going to do, and how the military might react, or what orders they might carry out. I think it might be a little bit different in New York. I think you're going to receive some pushback from not only from the people, but believe it or not, I think the police will be pushed back, saying, they're used to a sort of a hierarchical structure, and you're not my boss type attitude if it comes to the military trying to tell police here what to do. And then you're going to have to worry about crowd control, because I do think the masses are going to come into the streets. However, that's a hopeful point of view. You never know how it's going to play out. And I question whether or not we are going to rise up and defend, as a city, defend these people that are living on the streets. So, Chicago, I can't answer, but I do think the money was drawn down, so that initiative is in effect. But what happens here remains to be seen. I do think there are some groups like a vocal Neighbors Together in Brooklyn. I work with, and I think Charisma was on this call earlier. Charisma White is with us. She works with me with a group of impacted advocates, so it's going to be part of our conversation also, pushing the city in a certain direction.
Yeah. Well, so much going on in the city. And the other thing you talked about, I do walks with my son, and we walk for a couple of miles every evening. And there's so many storefronts that are still empty, so many businesses that are still, have that's been lost, so many places that have lost their businesses. And I'm looking at these places, and like at the same time, you have people sleeping on the street. These places can be converted to housing, they don't have to stay empty. But because of the capitalistic, view of things in this city, you have these spaces that are able to be occupied, but not unoccupied for long periods of time. So I don't really, the policies, the issue with homeless is not on the radar at all, right? Because they're not utilizing what we have.
So I think it's more complicated than that. I think you bring an important point, though. It shows that one thing, that there's a stark contrast as you walk the streets in New York of poverty and wealth existing side by side. Mm-hmm. And not far from Fulton, Chelsea, whenever I'm on 9th Avenue or I'm at Holy Apostles and I stand on 9th Avenue in front of Holy Apostles and I look at Hudson Yards, I'm stunned. Right, the contrast existing. I'm standing in front of Holy Apostle. There are 200 people waiting online to get in to get something to eat, and then you look at the opulence. 3 blocks down. Further west in Hudson Yards, and it's stunning. But I will give the state and city. I don't want to demonize them for not trying to turn some of these vacant spaces into housing. There are these little ordinances and these pain in the ass issues that make it a challenge to do that. There is a good effort, and I think a real effort to acquire some of these, especially big office buildings, and turn them into housing. But there are these ordinances that make it a pain in the you-know-what to do. So unpacking a lot of that. The individual storefronts, no, I think a lot of them will, gentrification or rezoning were coming through, and folks are waiting on their payday, and it didn't happen, right? I live in Harlem, and all along 3rd Avenue in East Harlem, you see that all the time. They were supposed to build 2 big luxury towers. They forced the mom and pop stores out, and now every 2 or 3 stores is a vacant storefront because the landlord raised the rent so high, thinking that he was going to make his money, and it's just sitting there vacant. So it's problematic throughout the city, and it's something that we have to address. And groups like Picture the Homeless and others were addressing that for years.
Thank you so much for all you do. That was great.
Thank you, Luana.
Yeah, thanks, Luana. Damu, Caitlin, I'm going to put your question on positive, unless it's really precisely about this, because I'd like to bring Keith in, and then we can ask them both questions, and because Keith is going to talk on some issues surrounding this discussion, and I think we could probably go into a discussion about what we can do too at the same time. Does that make sense?
very, very quickly, when we were looking at Midtown South mixed-use development, the zoning package that the city planning had prepared, there was nowhere to see that there will be any affordable housing set aside, or any talk about what percentage has to be not just affordable housing in specifically, but like what percentage should really be there for dealing with the homelessness. I'm just aware because I had an opportunity to work on a housing for the homeless in downtown Brooklyn. So I became very aware of the issue with homelessness, and why is the political, there's no political talk about what do we positively do about homeless housing. They just leave it to any kind of a developer who may want to do it, or any kind of a public institution or private institution, NGOs who may want to do it. I think we have to have more of a political awareness or rather political commitment. We need to demand that as a political commitment. With a new mayor election coming up, we had talked about bringing Mamdani in to talk about, to talk to us, but maybe we should have a list of questions for him. We just hate the idea of having homelessness in the city, and that's the end of it, and there's nothing done for it. That's all I
Right.
want to say. Thank you.
You're absolutely right, Damu. And I've sent 3 letters to him already to have some discussions with him with a coalition. And we're not getting. I mean, they want to demolish. Most of our representatives in this area want to demolish public housing. We know that. So they're all pro development and developers' choice over the public's choice, no question. But Rob, do you want to make a quick comment about that, or you're muted?
Yes, my only comment would be, I agree, but I also agree that we need to stop using the word affordable and hone in on a number, right? So I stop using the term affordable and say we need housing for people with incomes of $50,000 a year or less. I use that as my baseline, but I go down rather than thinking up. And that gets people thinking a little bit of a different way, right? Because if we continue to use AMI, which we determine to be the metric for affordable housing, we're going to suffer because it's a flawed calculation. So I'll stop there for the sake of time.
Absolutely. But that I'm going to bring in Keith. I'm going to bring in Keith and let him introduce himself. He's been fighting the good fight. He's got an interesting slogan, and he feeds a lot of people. Keith, why don't you take this floor, and I'll add your pen, and why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Keith McHenry, and when in 1979 and 80, I was a produce worker at a natural food store called Bread and Circus in Cambridge, and I would take the food that I was supposed to throw out down to public housing about 3 or 4 blocks away in Portland Ave, and it was all the people were so excited to get all this wilted produce. It was kind of shocking. And one day, the mothers that I was distributing the food to were telling me about this brand new building that had just opened across the street where they were designing nuclear weapons. And that's where I got the idea for the name Food Not Bombs. And in those days, there wasn't really a lot of people living on the street. There was like in Manhattan, you'd have the Bowery. We had a little bit of that in what was called the Combat Zone in Boston, but it wasn't like a crisis yet, And so we were really Food Not Bombs. Besides delivering food to the public housing and so on, we were mostly a street theater group, and we were organizing against like the war in El Salvador and Guatemala, things like that. And we came up with this idea of dressing up as hobos and go. We also were organizing against nuclear power, and the 8 of us that became Food Not Bombs, after a protest at Seabrook Nuclear Power Station in New Hampshire, and one of us got arrested, Brian, and it was Brian's arrest that inspired us to do this street theater where, well, first we're doing bake sales to pay back the guy that bailed out Brian, and then we weren't really making any money doing that, but we also had a moving company because we had this old van. We had this moving company called Smooth Move. And these people had this poster they were throwing out that said, wouldn't it be a beautiful day if the schools had all the money they needed? And the Air Force had to hold a bake sale to buy a bomber. So we decided to dress up as military uniforms from an Army Navy surplus store and have the poster there and then do the bake sale. And it didn't really raise more money, but we could stop people from, they would get their attention when walking by. So the next thing we decided to do was to dress up like hobos and have a soup line outside the stockholders meeting of the Bank of Boston, which was investing in the nuclear weapons industry and in Seabrook Nuclear Power Station. So we didn't really organize enough of our friends to make a soup line. So I went to what was a really a Depression era shelter that was still active on Pine Street called the Pine Street Inn. And about midnight, I gave a speech to the guys sitting there, and they came down. You know, they were like excited. Oh wow, protest like the '60s. The few of the people that were awake enough to know what I was talking about, and they all showed up, about 30 people, and it was this amazing experience. And they were telling us that there was no food for homeless people in Boston, and that we should just do it every day. And some of the people, because this was on March 26, 1981, so Reagan had been in power about a little over 30 days. And people were shocked. Oh, wow, soup lines already? We thought that the policies of diverting money to the military, to Star Wars and MX missile, would and cuts in social services would have an impact, but not within 30 days. And our message was that if Reagan and the Bank of Boston were to continue in their policies of redlining the neighborhoods in the Boston area, to depress them and then just pick up the land for cheap, as they had been already doing, that there would end up being homelessness in America, and that you would start to see people standing on the streets at soup kitchens. So that was how we got our start. Then by 19 I ended up moving to San Francisco in 1987, and I started a second group there. And so now you have 8 years of Reaganomics, and the homeless crisis is now in the news, and they're starting to enforce they created the broken window theory had come about, and then they were now doing quality of life crimes, and they're creating, like, coming back to the Great Depression era, like in California, if in the Grapes of Wrath, they have 647I was something that Steinbeck writes about, which was an anti-lodging law that was passed in the Great Depression. Well, that law started being enforced again in San Francisco. And so we had come up with the idea in the Haight-Ashbury, where a lot of people lived in Golden Gate Park, is a massive park, that there was food at the Haight-Ashbury Soup Kitchen Tuesday through Friday, and 2 churches served on Saturday and Sunday, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, but no food on Monday. So we thought, oh, we'll just set up at the end of Haight Street at Stanton, and the entrance to Golden Gate Park, and then we'll have our literature. And we were like tight with the local authorities in Boston, so our assumption was that this is even more liberal than Boston and and Cambridge. In fact, we held protests against nuclear arms race, co-sponsored by Cambridge City Council, and so and they were very proud that they had a food not bombs, in Cambridge. And so my expectation was, because it's America's most liberal city, that the same thing would be happening, something similar. But then this hippie came by and said, hey, you can get a permit for this. Just write a letter to the Parks Department, which I did. And then the police would come by every Monday and ask us about this permit, and then I'd go over to the Parks Department and ask them about the permit. And they had no idea what I was talking about. So then on August 15th of 1988, riot police came out of Golden Gate Park and arrested 9 of us for serving food without a permit. And it turns out there was no permit, but we didn't, we thought we were going to get such a thing. And then the next week, so people were pretty upset because there was photos in the local paper of riot police guarding the food from the homeless. And so then the next week, there's another big march, and down Haight Street, carrying the food, banging pots and pans, having our banners. And the police arrest, I think it was 24 people on August 22nd. Oddly enough, the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force had come to observe those arrests, and they write a memo to the FBI field office on August 29th of '88, claiming we were a credible national security threat. And then eventually there's on Labor Day itself, there was 54 arrests, and the government mayor was freaking out because he was supposed to be a very liberal mayor, and he had been a social worker before he was elected mayor, Art Agnos. And so we had been trying to set up meetings with him, and he did agree to meet with us, and then they created a permit process, which they manipulated, and they eventually, the next mayor deletes the process. So in all, we are arrested a total of 1,000 times from 1988 to 1994. And in those series of arrests, we had to come up with all kinds of strategies. So we had risk arrest one day a month with Food Not Bombs, and then your church group would come out and serve the food and get arrested. When the National Lawyers Guild came out, they didn't get arrested because they had a big banner saying National Lawyers Guild, so the cops arrested the people coming to eat. And we would have decoy food where we'd have buckets that were really basically had very little food in them. Police would arrest those people. Then we'd come out with another small sample of food, decoy food. They'd get arrested, and then we'd come and feed everybody that was there. But also during this time, there's the savings and loan crisis, which was the housing crisis that's before Obama's, housing foreclosure crisis. And so we noticed that there were lots of abandoned buildings in San Francisco. And so we would write down the addresses. We'd actually had teams that would, we were in solidarity. It was Food Not Bombs and the San Francisco Tenants Union. We held a meeting one Thanksgiving and before Thanksgiving, and showed a video on squatting in Europe. And so right before Thanksgiving, we took over one floor above a XXX movie theater in the Tenderloin, and we moved people into that facility. One of the people that attended that movie told the realtor that he was interested in buying that building. They didn't want to go to that building to show it off, so they gave him the key. And so we used that key to get into that and moved a bunch of families in there. And then there was a gutted building across from the main soup kitchen in San Francisco, Glide Memorial Church, and we knew the mayor would come there to cut turkey as his photo op. So we took over that building the night before, and we hung banners out of it. And one of the banners was Homes Not Jails. And that kicked off this movement that we did in San Francisco, where we would ride around on our bikes and we'd look at abandoned houses. We'd go to the tax office at City Hall, find out who owned them. And if it was like a whole list of mortgage companies, then we would take off the lock there, break into it, put our own locks on it. And at one point we had a wall at the tenants union of all the keys and addresses, and we had 400 key locks on 400 houses. And we would then at Food Not Bombs meal, which by this time we're doing twice a day in front of City Hall, as well as the Monday at Golden Gate Park, and we would find the people that seem the most compromised and say, hey, would you like a place to live? And they would go, oh yeah, that would be great. And say, well, we'll meet you at 9 o'clock at this address and we'll help you move in. And we would have cleaned it up. We would have turned on the water, tested to see if the pipes were cool and it wasn't going to flood the house. And then we would either we would turn on the electricity ourselves, or we would provide them with a lease so they could go and start buying power for that house. And at one point we had about people housed in 100 different houses, properties. And then there would be all kinds of excitement with that, where eventually, maybe our strategy was only work in the day, because no one would steal a house in the middle of the day. And so people just would all of a sudden go, oh, that's so cool. They're finally fixing up that property next door and people are moving in. So it worked really well. The only struggles we often had were people who had squatted it before us, and they happen to be jailed, and then they come back and find us, people living in the house that they were squatted in. So sometimes we had to negotiate with them and so on. So that we also during that period started bidding on. There was a law called the Stewart-McKinney Act, and Clinton was decommissioning military bases, and the Presidio military base in San Francisco was being decommissioned. And so we started taking over enlisted families' housing that was abandoned, wearing housing. And we also made a coalition with Religious Witness with homeless people. And so we would take over those buildings periodically and get arrested. We got arrested trying to bid on those housing. So that was kind of our relationship with taking abandoned housing and housing people. The other because of the arrests in San Francisco, people were pretty upset about it, and they would start new chapters. So by 92, we had maybe about 70 chapters in mostly in the United States, but also in Canada, one in Brixton, London, and then several in Australia. And then there'd be every time, at one point, I ended up getting framed on the California 3 strikes law, so I was facing 25 to life. That created a whole nother series of news stories and so on, so more groups would start. And then there'd be arrests, like in Tampa, Florida, got arrested repeatedly. So then the news of that would encourage new groups to start. Fort Lauderdale was getting arrested, new groups would start. Orlando gets arrested, LA gets arrested, Arcata, California. So each of these waves of arrests for sharing free food would encourage more people to start to basically defy the authorities and start new chapters. And then the other thing that was happening, we were really tight with the punk movement. So there would be liner notes in fat records like Good Riddance often advertised us, Papa Gandhi, Believe, Bad Brains, all these bands would promote Food Not Bombs, and that became a whole thing in the hardcore punk scene all over the world, really. So punk bands would tour, and I know, like, I was visiting the chapters in the Philippines, and a European punk band went through, and they would buy them these huge brass kettles and help them start Food Not Bombs in each town where they were touring. So by the time I got there, was like 50 chapters in the Philippines. When I got to Indonesia, there was 100 cities had Food Not Bombs there from another tour of another punk band that went through there. So now today there's at least 1,500 chapters worldwide, and usually every week now there's like 2 or 3 chapters. New chapters are started right now. I think we've just got 3 in the last couple of days that have been want to be added to our Food Not Bombs map on foodnotbombs.net. And now also what the housing issue here in Santa Cruz, which sounds to be very similar to what's going on in New York City, and which is also happening in San Francisco. So I live in Santa Cruz. So there's this whole thing, as people might know, there was an organization called the Cicero Institute, which was started by one of the founders of Palantir, which is a organization that got its initial, he himself and Peter Thiel and Alex Karp and all these people that own Palantir, which now has all our data because of Doge or whatever. He started this anti-homeless organization called Cicero. It actually has like 5 parts, but I focused on homelessness, so I didn't really pay attention to what the other 4 parts are. And he's providing templates to states to outlaw homelessness. And so he's had quite a bit of success. And one of the things he also organized for was around the what was Martin versus Boise, which became Johnson versus Grants Pass. And he was able, with the governors of Oregon and California and Washington State, to have this Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals case that was used to in the Grants Pass case, Martin versus Boise, to have it overturned. And it was overturned. And then about 30 days after, the Supreme Court ruled that you could criminalize the homeless, the governor of our state, Gavin Newsom, signed an executive order against encampments within the state. And they also already, even before he signed the executive order, which actually Trump plagiarized and essentially used the exact same ideas for his executive order 6 months later, started to step up their sweep. So in Santa Cruz, the homeless industrial complex is very, very tight with the developers, and they have been promoting this idea, yes, in my backyard, which is promoted by most famously in our state, the former Board of Supervisors member Scott Wiener, who is now a state senator from San Francisco. He was really pushing the anti-camping laws in the city of San Francisco. And people might recall there was when Gavin Newsom was becoming Board of Supervisors, and then became mayor, he was going to end homelessness in 10 years. And now it's like, I think they just celebrated the 23rd anniversary of his announcement of ending homelessness. And so there's in Santa Cruz, and I see this, I was actually at I'm one of the members of the National Union of the Homeless, and we were having a meeting at the People's Forum, actually, in Manhattan, and I would walk by Port Authority and all the people living in tents around these luxury condos and that were empty. And so we have the same thing out here, where we have empty luxury condos and people living around the base of them. So what their idea was, this create a lot of housing, and then it would somehow, because of supply and demand, the rents would go down. Well, that has not happened. So for instance, in our housing here, it's $4,000 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment. And the affordable housing is actually just public relations. It's to get people to think that the government is doing something. So here, if you can qualify for affordable housing in Santa Cruz if you make $93,000 a year or under. And so that, and I think it's around 100 and some thousand in San Francisco, because of the formula that they have. And so then the other thing we have for affordable housing in Santa Cruz, and this happens a lot of places, is there's a trust where if you're a developer and it doesn't pencil in that you can make a profit building your building, then you can pay into this trust, and then you don't really have to have affordable housing in your project. And that's the most common thing that happens. So we have 38 luxury condo projects in Santa Cruz being built right now. They used our campaign for rent control. They raised $750,000 from the National Association of Realtors to defeat a rent control that would have affected 5,000 units. And our town, Santa Cruz, has 63,000 people. And anyway, so they spent that money, but it was very easy to defeat us. And then they used the balance, more of that money, to get rid of the two progressive city councilors who were warning us of this new effort to build luxury condos all over town. So they recalled them in a really corrupt campaign, using more of that money. And then when they replaced it, they used the cover of COVID to just ultimately pass all this developer projects, and that's going forward. And they're just they've devastated virtually all of our local, in the city of Santa Cruz anyway, most of our local mom and pop shops have gone under. You go down the main street of Pacific Avenue, and I think I counted 20 vacant shops in those blocks there. And it's just been devastating to our community. Then the other thing that happened is that the state, so then part of Newsom's executive order is to withhold money from cities that don't get rid of encampments. And so one of the big driving forces behind this development is the what's called Housing Matters, which is the homeless shelter here in Santa Cruz. And they use their people to they were helpful in getting rid of rent control. They were helpful in, we were trying to get a ballot measure on that they helped defeat on size limits on housing, on glass buildings and so on. And so they're like hooked into that. And the city was able to get from the state $2.5 million, no, $4.5 million to for what's called encampment resolution grants. This was even before the executive order. This was in the April before the executive order. And it goes to the city, and it's focused in this particular, this $4,500,000 is focused on getting rid of the homeless around the shelter. So what they do is they have weekly sweeps, and we've tried to negotiate with the city and to alter this so that people basically move across the street, they clean one side, then they move back, and they don't take all their belongings. But what they do is they shut the whole area off each week, and then they go in and they confiscate people's belongings and throw them away, people that can't scurry away fast enough with their belongings. And then we've been spending roughly $1,000 a month on replacing those pup tents and sleeping bags, because it's actually very cold here. You may notice I'm wearing a coat. And so we do that. Food Not Bombs does that. During COVID, there was when it started, our city announced that all the homeless would be driven into these chain link fence cages on parking lots and provided with 2 portable toilets. And we protested that successfully and stopped it. But it also meant that all the 2 places where people could eat were shut down because they were indoors. One was the senior meal, the other was the soup kitchen. So there's no food for people living outside for 3 years in Santa Cruz. So we shared food every day for 3 years. And thank goodness the soup kitchen opened on the end of the 3rd year. So that was quite stressful. But our policies here are, just so anti-homeless, and they really adopted basically the Cicero Institute's ideas of criminalizing the homeless. And it's very worthwhile to check out the success. For instance, I think in Tennessee, they were able to get a law passed that it's a felony to be homeless. And I think they even have a stand your ground attribute to the Kentucky law, where you can shoot a homeless person if they don't move fast enough. Thank goodness nobody has actually done that yet, but they are protected if they do feel that necessary to shoot homeless people. But so that's sweeping the country, and now you've got Trump's anti-homeless laws that's happening, and my concern is that they will. And here, our local government has talked about moving people into this military base called Camp Roberts, which is out in the middle of nowhere in this little village near it called San Miguel, and it straddles the counties of Monterey and San Luis Obispo. And so I'm very, very worried that the Trump administration, and particularly if there's a major war where U.S. soldiers are being killed, as could potentially happen in any number of theaters of war, that the kind of the hostility in this against homeless people will be amplified, and it will be more brutal, and it'll be more possible for homeless people to be interned. And so I think that's something that we want to push back on.
Yeah, that's incredible, Keith. Thank you for all that. It's fascinating. What are you doing as far as connecting with the political system? Or are you just mostly focused on helping the folks on the ground?
Well, our perspective here is to pressure. So we kind of have given up on particularly the local government. One thing we are trying to negotiate with and slow down is they're making a new law for the county to respond to a law that was passed by the city, which bans RVs and large vehicles in the city overnight. I think, you have to get a permit, but you have to have proof that you either own or rent the property that your RV is parked in front of. So a lot of people then escaped into the county. Now they have attempting to get a law passed where they, instead of taking the person's vehicles, and now this will be all vehicles, RVs and cars that people are living in, they had a policy of towing them to yards and then for $500 you could get it back if you got there within 24, or within the 24 hours basically. But if you didn't have that, then the fees would go up, and so people couldn't afford to get their vehicles out, and so then they so the tow yards were getting upset about that. So now this new law is that they put like a sticker on your vehicle, and then you don't move it within a few days, then they just haul it to the junkyard and trash it right then and there, and there's no possibility of getting it back. So that we are trying to push back on that. We're trying to be nice to the board of supervisors, so they will actually support us. But typically they make really gruesome anti-homeless laws themselves. That would be our only interaction. Usually what we do is we protest the shelter because of their support of because they're very active in supporting the homeless sweeps. I mean, they're very vocal about saying that this is a great idea. So that's where we pressure them to hopefully embarrass them, to pressure the city to have less, because the city's immobile. They won't do anything. They're viciously anti-homeless, and in reality, the board of supervisors are, at least the past ones, have been at the core of trying to get rid of homeless people. There's a couple of two new ones that might be supportive, but generally speaking, we find that the government is the enemy of the people.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing. It's like an all-out war, and I look at those folks as the front lines. If we can't stop people from abusing those folks, they're going to come after everybody else, and they are, with the housing. And what you have these chapters, and how many people in all of these chapters, everybody, and are you in touch with them regularly, like at monthly meetings and so forth?
We used to actually have a worldwide Zoom meeting. We actually discontinued that because there became a big split between people that were pro-NATO and anti-NATO, because some of the Eastern European groups wanted a wider war and wanted to topple Putin. And then other groups were like, no, we don't think that we want to fund and arm Nazis in Ukraine, basically. So there became a split with that. So we kind of stopped having our meetings from that. We do, and then we set up like a worldwide Facebook chat thing but it's not used that much. I do talk to a lot of chapters all the time, mostly on Facebook, and occasionally other ways. My toll-free number is the number that's published and many people from all over the world call me and want to either find food at a local Food Not Bombs group, and so then I will message them either through Facebook or Messenger or Instagram, or however we can, to alert them the fact that there's hungry people that have called looking for food, or people looking for to volunteer. Now we had like two world gatherings that were pretty successful, but then the FBI realized that was not cool. And so the next one we tried, which was in Manhattan in 2004, got crushed by the FBI. They basically visited chapters that were planning to go and intimidated them, and particularly in the Midwest, like Denver, Kansas, and throughout that. I was going to pick people up in a school bus, but they shut them down. So that was a great way. We had over 1,000 people participate in the 1995 Food Not Bombs gathering in San Francisco that went on for 10 days, and we took over buildings, and that was an amazing thing. But and the people that attended that were the ones that proposed the 2004 one that then got, the group that proposed it was Richmond Food Not Bombs, so they got killed when the FBI started to fight with the other FBI person in the Manhattan chapter. But so that ended that. But it's very it just seems to happen and organically. And I think the issue is that because we have three principles, that the food is always vegan and vegetarian and free to anyone, rich or poor, drunk or sober, that there's no headquarters, directors, or presidents, that each group's autonomous and makes decisions, including the people that need the food in the decision making, and that we're not a charity, but that we're dedicated to nonviolent direct action to change society so no one has to eat in the soup kitchen. That makes it so that it just happens everywhere. And I just saw like a 25th anniversary happening in Manila for that chapter, and then there's going to be a Harrisburg celebrating its 5th anniversary. There's like, it's kind of like that. It's amazing.
Are you growing your food too, or is it?
Some chapters do. Yeah. When I lived in Taos, New Mexico, I lived there for like 16 years or so. We had a project called the Food Not Bombs Free School, and people from all over the world would come there, and we would do permaculture and grow food in Taos. Although the people, we only fed like about 20, 30 people in Taos. But it was an idea of, there's a project called Food Not Lawns that was born out of the Eugene, Oregon Food Not Bombs chapter. And so groups are doing some of that. But in our case here, we have this massive amount of organic farms, and we are the salad bowl of America. And so we've had to be wary of some of our food. So we accept food that is north of Santa Cruz, but we do not accept food south of Santa Cruz because the world's largest lithium battery fire happened here in Moss Landing, and it poisoned about 70% of the produce that the U.S. eats. And so we have, we try to minimize the food that we get from that region now. But sometimes we had something like 30 cases of celery last week, and we had to redistribute it all to other food programs. It was just way too much. So.
Did you make a celery soup?
Yeah, we did, and it's really crazy. So we're blessed with that. And San Francisco, when I was doing it there, we had these produce warehouses that veritable vegetables, particularly, where we would get a truckload of food every day, of organic produce.
I'm going to open it up to other folks here. I'm sure people has some questions on their mind. And Caitlin, you had your hand up earlier, and I'm just,
thank you so much. That was amazing to hear about the work just kind of how it's both kind of global and super local. And I loved hearing you talk about the history, and I guess I was thinking about what Rob was talking about earlier, and also now, Keith, what you're talking about, and connecting around the kind of representation and criminalization, which, to your point, just the thousands of arrests that you and all of the members of Food Not Bombs have endured. And I wonder about like the kind of the front of this war that's discursive, or the narrative changing. And if you could, I guess Food Not Bombs is that in itself, but talk more, maybe a little bit about the ways in which we can fight back against this, about this on that level, because that seems like where we see right now the ways in which that's happening in DC, right? The ways in which this kind of militarization of DC is taking place. So anyways, just interested to hear yours and Rob's thoughts on the kind of discursive front of this battle.
Yeah, I see Rob is still here. I know he's got an appointment real soon. Maybe we can take like 3 bullet points from each of you. And Rob, if you're still with us here.
Yeah, just quickly. And when Keith talked about the politicians, and you asked a question about working with politicians, I think what we have to understand is we have a representative government, and they speak to the people that they claim represent them. So they don't think homeless people are voting, right? So how do we change that narrative, right? We have to get involved. I can't stomach electoral politics, but somehow we have to get involved. And I learned that by the way Trump loaded up the Supreme Court. So that's one thought. I think the other thing is we have to send strong messages to the politicians that if you don't move in this direction, just as fast as we voted you in, we can work to vote you out. I don't know if we've organized ourselves strong enough to send those kind of messages yet, but I think that comes with organization. Even for somebody like me who can't stomach electoral politics, we really have to force ourselves into those conversations.
Yeah, we found that outside money was so powerful that, because we had, that we had a majority of 4, and we thought we would get things done, but they were able to, through corruption, get rid of the 2, best politicians in our town, and it was like the outside money. So that we, in fact, we voted against all the things that are happening, and we actually had we won these votes, and they ignored them and just do what they want. So, for instance, we voted on a bond measure called S to raise money to fix up our libraries. And they decided they would divert that money to build this huge parking garage, and they're going to add a library to it. And they have to have this big parking garage because they're building all these condo units, and the developers don't want to, because they're building these developments in a floodplain, they don't want to have parking for their tenants. So the city is building them a parking garage with the money that we voted for helping, refurbish our library system. So, I think we've gotten to the point now where, in fact, people are so dismayed by that. We held a protest against the celebration of it. I got arrested at it, disrupting it. But very few people came because they're just like, they cut down all the heritage trees, even though there's a law against doing it and so on. So we kind of have given up on that stuff. Now, I think in the larger, and I've written, I have a Substack and a blog called anarchistcook .blog. And I think one of the things, because I think we, this level of fascism, and it's bipartisan, and it's like, basically they make it worse per whoever's in power, moves it to the next political party to make it worse. Is that this idea of mutual aid and local building community. So during the lockdown here, we would have about 150, 200 people meet every single day to eat, and we hand out free clothing, and then we're like this community that we're all friends and know each other, and the people with the mental health issues, we like have a whole strategy for helping them that's been quite successful, really, which is basically treating everybody with dignity like they're a real human. That's basically the thing. And I think that's at the root cause of the homeless crisis, is the dehumanization of the homeless, which has gone, and that, I think my last blog post, which is something like Incarcerating America's Homeless, refers to that. And because it's the same language that they use to justify killing the Palestinians. They're not human. When I was in Palestine, I was shocked that you could actually legally go to the West Bank and kill any person you wanted, and you wouldn't even get a parking ticket. So, long as it was a Palestinian. So this dehumanization. So the solution, to my way of thinking, is that we build community in our communities, and we have this amazing amount of support, even though the people that get all the media are the people that hate the homeless, and large, for instance, here the chief attorney for Google, Miss Prado, her husband is the head of the anti-homeless organization called Take Back Santa Cruz. I mean, and they own like a several $million mansion on the beach, and he spends his days trying to get the government to get rid of homeless people. That's what he does, and even though he's a millionaire. So so I think that the crushingness of fascism is going to be it's already so big, and it's going to be even bigger. and particularly if these wars are become full-on wars where U.S. people are being overtly killed as opposed to covertly killed, then banding together and supporting each other is going to be super important. And one of the campaigns we did have was fuck you, we're not going into your concentration camps. And our shelter is actually, the nickname is concentration camp. And at one point, our shelter had a list of 750 people that were banned from the shelter. Allegedly, according to point in time count within the city limits, there's only 800 homeless people, which is definitely not true. But to only allow the 50 people in the shelter to be the only ones not banned from the shelter is incredible. And the shelter is horrible, and no one wants to be there. And then they have the tiny houses. Almost everybody I know that got into a tiny house left and went back out on the streets because it was just unbearable, and because no bathrooms or anything like that, and hot, and even in, so that's been a failure. And again, the affordable housing is not affordable for anybody except for, really, unfortunately, Google and Facebook, Meta workers and stuff, low level engineers, which now are losing their jobs because we're now feeding people. A bunch of people just got laid off from Tesla, and you're eating at Food Not Bombs. So
Wow.
that's the kind of thing going on. But so having like our local, so we were having free concerts every holiday. We have the food, we have hand washing station, free clothing, and building community. And I think that's really, trying to stay out of the way of the crush of totalitarianism, and almost like in the 1984, where Winston briefly leaves the Matrix and sadly goes back. But that's kind of, I think, mainly what we have to do, and also to just build the confidence in homeless people that they don't have to march into the camps against their will.
Yeah. Boy, you bring a nice breath with you, of sanity.
Thank you.
Um, you really do. We've covered some of these things, and we've talked about these things, and it's always good and you bring some new light to it, and it's across across the city. And again, I love how you connect it with the Palestine, just like public housing. We're not, what's happening at public housing. They want the property, they want that landscape, and they're willing to move people out. And it's a slow way of killing people too. A lot of people aren't going to survive that move, and if they would come over and they would bomb the place clean and start fresh. They make their money out of demolishing, destroying, and building, and destroying and building. But they're not really building, are they? They're not building anything of real value. They're not building communities, and that's a real problem. So I know we're running a little late, but if anybody has any pressing questions or want to ask anything else, please.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, my internet cut out for a little bit, but I heard a group that you mentioned, I think said they were going to take back Santa Cruz. Like, who are they taking back from? I'm sorry, my internet cut out.
Okay, they're taking it back from the homeless.
Oh,
so there's
God.
this ideology that you can't go downtown because there's all these homeless people there, which is they promote, and a lot of the people that promote it don't even ever go downtown anyway, so I have no idea. They're just frightened of homeless people, and they want them out. So we have the president of the Santa Cruz Union of the Homeless, Alicia Cool, when she realized she was going to be homeless, she because they red tagged the apartment she was living in, she stopped paying rent, and she used the money to buy a used RV, and she and her 3 children and a disabled husband would live near this abandoned lot, and so Manuel Prado would meet with the mayor and the police chief and the city manager and stuff and figure out ways, and they would have like this policy of ticketing her repeatedly so that she couldn't register her RV so they could tow it and trash it. And that this is like the campaign is to take back, and in California this movement is very, very big. They shut down Food Not Bombs in Santa Monica. Take back Santa Monica. They got this, and they're usually coordinated and with the local police department. So there's like special anti-homeless units in Santa Cruz that specifically go and try to bankrupt people living in their cars so they lose their vehicles. This is like and what's really tragic is the amount of women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s who lose their vehicles and then come to Food Not Bombs and think that there's a homeless shelter for women, and of course there's no such thing. And if you went into the women's shelter, you actually have to have a physical address that you were fleeing from a batterer, which makes sense because there's limited resources. But they're so usually these older women, we give them a pup tent and a sleeping bag, and we find homeless people that we trust that can defend them against attacks, and then we try to help them move to the riverbanks or to the woods where they can be safely protected until at some point where they might get into the shelter. But that's but Take Back Santa Cruz is they are very, very big and throughout the state of California in trying to they're basically the politicians mobilize them to show citizen support to get rid of the homeless, and they comply because they want to get rid of the homeless.
Yeah, and I just don't know how to do it the right way. It's a horrible picture you paint. Appreciate that though, really do. You have immediate all these chapters, are they working together on like the narrative, the messaging, because they certainly got the money for the advertising, marketing, and PR. Besides social media, besides the Facebook, are we thinking in terms of how we might change that and echo it?
Well, we do get in local media, we do got local media, and not so much here in Santa Cruz because the fact the Weekly finally had an article about us after like decades of nothing. But so eventually venture capitalists have bought the local media here, so we don't have access to it.
Everywhere.
Yeah. So, but interesting, the message is organic from the Food Not Bombs world. So, solidarity, not charity, is a message, and it's maybe I should say this one very optimistic thing. So I lived in Taos, like I said, in New Mexico for years, and I had free storage for my property, and then the people that gave it to me had to start charging me money. So I went back like last month to get the balance of my belongings, which was actually a lot of the Food Not Bombs archives that I somehow saved through all the years of me being homeless and not homeless and so on. So we went back to get it, but we went to San Jose Airport, and I wear the T-shirt on Food Not Bombs T-shirt. I don't know if you could see it, but anyway, I wear this. I have 7 T-shirts, one for every day, and I got in that habit during COVID. So anyway, I'm at the airport, and somebody in line at TSA go, "Oh, great T-shirt," and then they get on the jetway, "Oh, great T-shirt." Get off the plane, great T-shirt. I've been wearing this T-shirt now since 19, on and off since 1980. I get one great T-shirt every month or two. Every day I've been getting between, at the minimum, 2 a day and often 7 a day. Bob Marley's youngest son, even, he was doing a concert in Santa Fe, and he's like, "Oh, great T-shirt," and from the stage, So anyway, so there's, when we started Food Not Bombs, there was this book that was out called The 100th Monkey, about how some monkeys started washing their food in a river, and before long, all over the world, monkeys are washing their food in rivers. So we had this was an anti-nuclear thing that was kind of in our community. So maybe there is this thing happening where people are like, with the starvation that's happening in Gaza, with I'm getting 10 to 20 calls a day from seniors in America that have no food. So maybe there's this feeling now, and Trump exasperating everything, making it more obvious. During the Biden years, it was kind of slightly concealed as the horrors, but under Biden, the homelessness in America increased by 32%. So the in a way, Trump is bringing us together to see a common enemy. And I'm really impressed at how MAGA does not like Trump. So because he promised all these things, America first, and he's doing Israel first, he's doing wars first, and he's supposed to be the peace president and so on. So there's this unity we're seeing here in Santa Cruz between Trump supporters who no longer support Trump and Food Not Bombs, and they're participating now in Food Not Bombs. So this is could potentially be a really transformative time if we can hang in there and not fall into this trap of this, demonizing the other, like demonizing Trump supporters. One of the smartest people I know in Santa Cruz went to January 6th but she's like this famous colonics healer, and people swear by her, and she's super smart, but she's really into Food Not Bombs, and she's making documentaries about homeless people now, right? So I think this whole like using the social media during COVID, particularly to divide us even more, is breaking down now and if there's an economic collapse of more obvious, greater proportions, which almost all economists believe will be the case, everybody now is being touched by family members who are either facing homelessness or are homeless. And we have to admit that a lot of our family members are annoying and we don't really want to live with us. I mean, we've had relatives live with us for up to like 8 months while we're trying to get them housing, and it can be frustrating. But I think there is this compassion that is happening amongst working class and poor Americans because they see that we're much closer to being homeless than being a billionaire, as one of the popular memes online points out.
Yeah,
How many
great.
hours is this program?
Well, we're over time right now.
Oh, bummer. Okay.
You've just been great to talk with and listen to.
That was good.
Yeah, maybe we need to bring you back and pick up, but
for sure.
Yeah, we could probably dig into some actions and so forth, but you've been really great to listen to. I've been impressed with your work. I've always been impressed with the work, and I love it. Food Not Bombs and out there feeding people, and the rest that went down in Florida. Alex Alex has an announcement, and I think we have to get to Alex's announcements and end up closing it. We're
there's just
closing the
one.
meeting.
There's just
Go
one,
ahead.
and it's very fast and factual. Congressman Nadler is not going to run for re-election, and I personally do not know who might step in, but that's just a recent thing. I think it was announced in the last 24 hours.
I think a few people has their eyes on that, and they're not our friends either. We really have to come together and very tight and find our relationships and build coalitions. And by the way, Keith, we're doing a lot of coalition building around public housing. We have a coalition, a big group. I know your focus, you're busy with what you're doing, but certainly would love to, maybe think about having you back here, and also where we might intersect, and also forums in the future. I think it'll be in the evening. I promise you the forums will be in the evening.
Thankfully, I wake up at 5 every morning, so
Oh yeah.
It was not a problem logging in at
Okay.
6:30.
All right. Good. Good to
Had to
know.
get up
I
at
was
5
feeling
for
so
my whole
guilty.
life.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
really quickly, I think
Uh-huh.
Renee had, I'm not sure if she was raising her hand or just waving an
Sure.
agreement. But maybe I know, Keith, you have two chapters here, I think, one in downtown in the village and one in Harlem. But I didn't see anything updated since 2019, and I was wondering maybe we can have them at the communities together, John,
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, I think sadly the Harlem one has stopped. There is, I think one of the Brooklyn ones is still happening, and the Lower East Side has not missed since the Tompkins Square riots.
Oh
Okay, yeah,
wow.
that's in Thompson Square. Okay.
Yeah, they're
Can
every
you?
Sunday at 4:30 at the chess boards,
Mhm.
and I what's amazing is I used to visit them right after the riots, and they were the food at Tompkins Square largely. They cook at the Catholic Worker House, St. Joe's House, and and then there was a long time where there was a bunch of churches that I would go to visit Food Not Bombs, and I couldn't find them in Tompkins Square easily because there was a church group at every single entrance to the park. Now that's what, as the gentrification has happened, Food Not Bombs is now one of the remaining food programs there.
Okay.
But it would be great to definitely I think that they would they're in coalition with lots of different things that are going on, and they were very involved in the squatters movement, after and in the community gardens movement. In fact, before Manhattan Institute, basically made the city control the community garden movement more.
Put
And
us in touch with them, please,
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
have
yeah,
an event, and also our garden initiatives might work in connection with them. We build some more gardens and farms. I should say farms because they are producing food.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Um,
But yeah, that was good. So I just want to thank you, Keith, because my brain is like so much information and so much so much ideas that come from your speech. Not only do not only do you look like a rock star, but just doing rock star moves. And thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, that's great.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's so
thank you.
cool.
Emma, are you there? Emma?
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, Emma's from the community court. We have a urban farm in the back. We share a space there. They have the space. We work together on this urban farm. Emma, you want to? Did you have anything to announce, or did you want to say anything about what you guys are doing? And
Yeah, can do. Let me.
I didn't
Hey,
mean to
everybody.
put you on the spot there.
No, you're all good. You're all good. Was just actually on the Food Not Bombs website looking at locations, so thank you for that, Keith. Um, but yeah, if for those who don't know what we do, we are a community court in the Midtown area. We are through the city, but I work at a nonprofit that is above the court, that offers services as alternatives to incarceration for anyone charged with a misdemeanor in Manhattan. So we take almost all the misdemeanors, save for misdemeanor assault cases, and there is no jails at our site. Instead, we offer services, including social services, connections to housing, connections to for food services, and things like that, in order to actually address the root causes of these types of offenses. As John said, we have our urban garden house in the backyard here. I don't have any updates, unfortunately, John, on the leak that's happening back there. I've been trying to figure that out since you sent that email. Nobody can tell me any timeline on that, so I apologize. We're working with the city to try to get that fixed. But yeah, happy to take any questions.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for joining. Are you going to work with me on the communities together, or you have time? Or, did you guys want to do a tabling? Did you want to do a tabling event at our communities together?
Yeah, I would love to talk with you separately about that and how to best coordinate that.
Sounds good.
Thank
Renee, anything from you at all? Renee's or the TA Tenants Association leader for Elliott Chelsea, and They were just Renee and Layla, who's a district leader here, was interviewed on Errol Lewis. Yeah, Errol Lewis. And Errol Lewis could not carry his narrative forward, if I might add. They did a great job.
Yeah, it was sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to add anything about what's real quick before we go?
We're just going to continue fighting. I mean, we're going to be what? CB4 has a meeting tomorrow. They're going to look at the letter from HHH and CLU, Chelsea Land Use. I find a great deal of that letter not good at all. It also lets people know, yes, we're against all parts of what they've stated in the FEIS, but we're willing to negotiate. You can't negotiate with these people. You should have known this from the beginning and look at the history. It's not good. Willing to do this. Well, if they do that, there's no one who's going to hold them accountable. That just doesn't get done in this city or by anyone else. So we'll be there. Of course, we're going to be marching in the Labor Day parade. Also, SICA has African American Day Parade. We'll be marching with SICA. They'll be adding the chant, no demolition. So we'll be doing that as well. But we're just going to keep fighting and pursuing. And then when Nadler resigning from Congress, let's see what happens. Oh, he's not resigning from Congress. He won't run again. So we'll see what happens with everything else that's going on in this neighborhood, and seeing how people need to decide to be part of the electoral process or decide to run for themselves because they're not being represented. So we're at this touch point where everyone keeps talking about Trump, but you need to look locally as well.
Yeah.
Renee, I'm so sorry to ask this question right here, but I don't know when I'm going to next speak to you. But can my friend agree on a certain meeting time to meet you tonight? Like she doesn't want you to be late for your meeting, but she wants
we could be there at 6:00
at the bus stop.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell her. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Keith, it's incredible what's happening here. The committee board's taking several years to even contemplate supporting the public housing, even contemplating and writing some sort of letter, okay, in support. And when just about every person is against the demolition, so they're bent on taking this property to developers, and they've got relationships on the committee board and relationship, of course, throughout our political system. And you know this, it's happening there. It's not really any different. It's a big battle.
Yeah.
Anyway, with that, I think we should, let's see, September 21st is Communities Together. At this, we're working on presenting a whole block party for everyone. And we're looking for people to get involved, to participate, to support, to volunteer. I think, Pete, you volunteered last year, right? And Andre, if you're around, we'd love to have you. Anybody else? Damu, thanks for being here as always. And everyone else too. Charisma, nice to have you here always. Charisma, you have an event coming up. It's this Saturday, right?
Yes.
You want to tell everybody about that?
We're having a information table and barbecue / barbecue for the community in Brooklyn. We want to give them information on the campaigns of all nonprofit organizations. We do have something from the community council, from the Midtown South Community Council. We have the street sheets because now that food stamps is gonna be kind of difficult to claim, people need to know where to get pantry food, where to get maybe some laundry done, and soup kitchens everybody needs this information now. So, and we're gonna have several other campaigns that other organize. I kind of touch bases with mostly all nonprofit organizations. So I'm just trying to get it out here to the community.
Great, great. I'll try and make it there if I'm in town. There might be up harvesting. We've been kind of bringing lots of food down just about every weekend.
Okay.
Thanks, Chrisma. Thanks for being here with us. And we're almost a half an hour overtime.
I see
But
Sherry has her hand up though.
Yeah,
oh, I'm
Sherry's
sorry,
got
Sherry.
a
Sherry,
He hasn't said anything. So.
Sherry.
Hi everybody. Hi John. Sorry I can't turn my camera on, but my name's Sherry Leone, and I just wanted to put out there that the group that I work with, Street Homeless Advocacy Project, who we hope will come to do a presentation in community boards in Midtown soon. But we do have on Thursday nights from 7 to 9, one of our teams is on West 32nd Street near Penn Station. And so if anyone wants to direct people that are in the street and might be interested in both getting a meal, because they serve hot meals at that location. And we also offer placement at safe havens, not in congregate shelters, but at safe havens, which are a much easier and more appealing type of, they're shelters per se, but they're a little bit less restrictive, and they do typically have more individualized services for people because the rooms are smaller, lower density. And thank you very much, Keith. And I guess he disappeared, but it was very nice to hear from you about all these things. Sorry it's such a downer that so many of these things don't seem to be prevailing in terms of even just the narrative, but I hope that everybody's actions here will carry some weight in pushing back against what seems to be a really overwhelming and dispiriting effort in this country.
Sherry, won't you have an advocacy table at our event and come back and speak to your efforts? Is that something you want to do?
Yeah, I don't know about the event. What date is it again? I think
21st is Sunday, 21st.
Yeah, I know I cannot do that. I could see if anyone else in our group wants to come. I think we came last year with Norman, but I'll ask if anyone else, when we have our next meeting, I'll ask if anyone else wants to come on the 21st.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Okay,
John,
and then
Sherry and Charisma put that information in the chat.
oh, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sherry, and then please reach out to me a little bit, in an email, and I'll share it with the council, and then we'll see how we might be able to help you. And you have that thing happening this week?
Pardon, which thing? The weekly outreach or the?
Oh, it's a weekly. Yeah, I know about your weekly outreach near the church, but you said something about
That's right. That's exactly where they do that.
I didn't know you were serving food there, though.
Yeah, the person who runs that is Mark Greenberg.
Yeah, I know Mark.
Yeah,
Interfaith. Yeah,
that's Interfaith Assemblies. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they get participation from all different kinds of groups. I think they alternate. Sometimes it's a sick group and another group. There's two other groups. I'm blanking on their names. They take turns providing tables with hot meals.
Okay, so they're bringing hot meals to them. Okay.
They're
all right.
a table at that location.
It's ongoing.
Yeah, it's ongoing from 7 to 9.
Okay.
At the sort of at the backyard of St. Francis of Assisi.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I've known about them actually. I've known Mark. Mark doesn't like me anymore.
I'm sorry to hear that.
We're on the opposite side of City of Yes. It's a joke. It's a joke.
Oh well, listen, keep going there on that one, because I think that's it's a nuanced conversation, and in these times, it's difficult to make to change people's view from what they might see as something that benefits the larger But Keith spoke to that, this is really a pro-developer movement, the YIMBY movement.
Yeah.
And so that gets lost in all this excitement about how supply side housing, economics, there's this kind of concept is not effective in actually serving the people who are the most vulnerable and need it the most.
You're absolutely right. That's been disproven a long time ago, and they keep bringing it up. Build, build, build. Yeah, they want freedom to build whatever they want, wherever they want, and extract more money. And Keith, you laid that out well. And we're on that lawsuit with City of Yes. We haven't heard back about the decision. It went well, so maybe I'm sure it's just a step towards a larger battle. They don't let up. I mean, they don't let up as far as confiscating property and doing what they want. So anyway, that's what we're up against. So let's stick together, folks.
Yeah.
Let's band together.
Find common ground.
Yeah.
John, don't forget the Fulton Elliott Chelsea Coalition Against Demolition is also participating in a Labor Day parade. Unfortunately, this Saturday, Charisma, at 11 o'clock. So that's another thing that's coming on, to get our pots and pans, Keith, and our bells out.
Yep.
Ring out no demolition for the project. So just wanted to add that to the calendar. When you said pots and pans, I was like, yeah.
That's what we got to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other last announcements?
Well, it's great meeting all of you. This is really fun. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I really am. We certainly enjoyed you.
Really good. Really bad at really being good.
Yeah. And
really
it's
good at
interesting
really
how
being bad.
it's a nationwide struggle, and the same things happening in Manhattan. One thing we can say is Rudy Giuliani, who adopted San Francisco Mayor Frank Jordan's quality of life enforcement matrix program, and Rudy took all the credit for San Francisco's draconian laws, and but at least he's now going to get the Medal of Freedom. So anyway.
I was going to say that. Thank you very much. Birds of a feather flock together.
Exactly.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Can't wait to see you again. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll be back. Bye-bye.
Okay. Have a great day.
You too. That's great.
It was. Unfortunately, it's good, bad. Bye, Emma.